Hydration packs are awesome. They turn the most dry and barren trail into one where you've got, well, literally water on tap. But how is best to keep your water bladder and your water bottle clean and safe? We've got a heap of hacks to help. Hydration packs, like Camelbak, are great at giving you fresh water on the go, and not just for epic big days out either. No, they're great for shorter rides, as staying hydrated is important. Camelbak are one of the original creators of hydration packs, and since the 80s they've been keeping mountain bikers perfectly hydrated. And as mountain bikes have evolved and bottle space has got squeezed by suspension designs, it's meant that Camelbak has gone from being a nice to have to essential item. We're going to talk you through all the ways to keep your bladder and your bottle mould free. Let's dive in. You've bought a new bottle or a new hydration pack, it's well worth rinsing out, well, all of it. Use some mild soapy water, rinse it thoroughly and let it air dry. Now, if you've been a bit foolish like me and you've left a little bit of water in your bladder and then you've left your bladder in a nice, warm, sort of dark cupboard for a little bit, you might have grown something. Okay, it's black, sort of greeny black. Smells a lot like a really good loam track. Like dirt. Yes, you're right in guessing that I've grown a mould, which is great. There's over 10,000 different types of mould, and some of them are very mild and mostly harmless, and others are extremely toxic. And that's not to talk about the kind of bacteria or other viruses that might have grown in there. So yeah, don't drink this stuff, and this now needs a real deep clean. If you've been lax like me and let something grow in your reservoir, it's time for a deep clean. Here's how. Fill your sink with hot water and then add a mild dish soap. They're really good at cleaning and they don't leave a lot of aftertaste. Okay, time to disassemble the reservoir. We've taken the hose off with the click valve. Sink that in and give it a jiggle. Undo, because washing the outside of your reservoir, whilst useful and nice, isn't going to get rid of the problem. So we're going to unscrew it and submerge it in and make sure we've got lots of that water in there. Now, if it's really mouldy, leave it in there for a good while before you break out your brush. We're going to clean mechanically and chemically. The chemical cleaning has already started because we're using that mild dish soap, and we're going to use a brush to do the mechanical bit. This one is a dedicated brush from Camelbak. Lots of other different hydration packs have different brushes too, and it's just got a good dog leg so you can get easily in there without breaking the hatch on the top. And make sure that you scrub all the corners. Okay, sometimes it's easy to overlook that you've washed the reservoir, lickety-split, nice and clean, but you haven't cleaned the hose or the bike valve. The bike valves can get really grubby because they're bouncing around on the outside of your bike. They can get trail detritus, dirt, mud lodged in them, and they've got your ashes attached to them, so they can get really dirty. But Camelbak and others do really nice little brushes that you can slide into the bike valve and into the hose to give it a really good clean. That's what we'll do now. I'm wetting the brush and making sure it's got lots of nice clean water on it. I'm pushing it down inside. I'm going to submerge it now to help push some of the water through, and making sure I kind of clean it back and forth, making sure that those bristles can clean out all the nooks and crannies in the hose. If your bike valve has got the locking piece, make sure it's in the open setting. So we've got a closed no flow and then we've got an open flow setting. So just open the bike valve very carefully, don't cut it anywhere, and then just work the brush into that section. Make sure you clean all the edges. If your bike valve is really hard done by and it's got lots of black mouldy stuff in there, you can carefully slide it off to give it a really good thorough scrub. Mine's not too bad. Of course, you can get spare bike valves too, so if yours looks really bad and leaks a bit, you can get a fresh one. Time to rinse the whole system. So plug the hose in if you've removed it, because we're going to flow all the water through the hose and through the bike valve. Whilst it might seem a little bit tedious that we're filtering and rinsing all this water through, but it's really important that we don't have any leftover soap in the system. So running all this water through will be really good. Whilst it is a little bit tedious, it is essential to give it a second rinse. We don't want any soap left in the system, or because it's just rank to drink soap. Okay, with the pack washed and rinsed, now it's time, especially if it was quite mildewy and mouldy, to disinfect it. You can do this in a number of different ways. Camelbak do their own tabs for cleaning, but we found that you can use denture tablets too. Depending on your bladder size, if you've got the smaller one for a hip pack or you've got the really large one for a full-size backpack, you might need 1 or 2. Leave them in for about 10 minutes. After about 10 minutes, you can just pull a little bit of the fluid, this cleaning fluid, through the hose to make sure that you're going to clean that as well. With the solution worked away through the hose and the bite valve, it's time to rinse the whole system. So same process as before, lots of cold water to fill the reservoir, hold the reservoir up nice and high, open the bite valve and let it pour through. With one reservoir fully rinsed through the system, I'd probably do at least 1 more, but if your bladder's really big and you use lots of those tablets to clean it, maybe run 3. I think that's done. So that's at least 2 bladders that we've pushed through. And now it's time, the critical step, which is often missed, and that's to air dry it. Best practice is to unscrew and then use a small hook or maybe a coat hanger to invert the bladder and hang it up so it can drain and air dry. With the hose, you can undo it at the top and allow the bite valve pressure to release all that fluid through. We've used a small metal hook here, fashioned out of a metal coat hanger, just to hold the reservoir up by the port. And at the bottom here, we've used a plastic coat hanger just to open it out and make sure that all the air gets in there and all the moisture comes out. Best practice is to leave it somewhere warm and bright. So lots of sunlight, lots of UV, that can help kill some of the bugs. And also make sure you check on it and make sure there's no water pooling anywhere and drain it out. Make sure it's completely dried. It's imperative to dry the bladder and the reservoir so there's no water or moisture in there at all. And that's because mould is really tenacious. It can find a little hole or little spot just to live in water very happily. Great way of knocking any mould growth on its head. Obviously we've cleaned it, but the next stage is where we store it. If you're storing it somewhere a bit warm, bit dark, even if there's a tiny bit of moisture, you could get that mould growth back again. So, top tip, store it in the freezer. Storing it in the freezer means that that pesky mould, well, it just won't grow as quickly, and it shouldn't grow at all in the freezing conditions. If you, like me, have left a sugary energy drink in a bottle and then left your bike in the shed in the hot sun and forgotten about it, and something very interesting and probably very toxic has grown in it, we're going to show you how to wash it. First step, fill a sink with hot, mild, soapy water. If your bottle's particularly skanky, like this one, sorry, it's probably best to just try and fill it a little bit, just a little bit of water, gently spin it around so we're not getting loads of spores and we're not spraying ourselves with the mould, and then carefully tip this down your spare sink. Submerge the main bottle in the water. It's going to have to sit there for a little while. Now, with the top, you can actually disassemble them. Depending on which model you've got, you can do quite a lot of disassembly. So with this one, we've got a rubber plug. I'm going to drop that in. We've got an O-ring. We can drop that in. We've got the main assembly of the bite valve, which we can push out just carefully. Drop that in. We've then got this soft silicone rubber seal, which also can come off. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work and it might need to sit in the hot water first. If you've got something like a podium metal, one of these newer metal bottles, similar process. We're going to unscrew it, submerge this section. That one's less skanky, so we don't need to drain it. And then disassemble these parts. So with this one, we've got a bleeder valve here to help the air escape. So that just drops out. And then this O-ring silicone top also can just pop open. Then I would say make sure that the valve here is in the open setting to allow the water, clean water, to flow through it. And then just drop it in. We've left the bottles in there to soak for a little while because, well, my bottle was really quite grim. You can get lots of different bottle brushes. Camelbak actually make their own, and it's not just, oh, it's another brush. It is really, really soft, and also you get this great spiral bound one, which is really, really good for cleaning some of the different valves that you get on different bottles. So, great option. Time to murder that mould with a brush. I know it doesn't sound very good, but actually brush is great at agitating, get rid of stubborn bits and bobs, detritus that are stuck to your bottle. Especially good when it's in hot water. Let's begin. don't forget to clean the inside of the bottle too. Using the soft brush, carefully clean the valve. Okay, we've washed, we've scrubbed. Now it's time to rinse. Hi Mum, bet you never thought you'd see this. Yep, drying things out. It's really important because if you don't dry things out, well, mildew and mould can form. And whilst you might notice it because it'll taste funky, you'll really notice it because it might make you really sick, because some of it's really toxic. So make sure you dry all your bottles out before you store them. If you're unsure and you really let your bottle go and it got really grim, you can use denture tablets to try and kill all the bugs and bacteria that were in there. So that's another option. If you can disassemble your nozzle and it's soft and silicone or it's got a little diaphragm in it, you can drop that into the solution as well, as this process will give it a really good clean. Simple process, fill the bottle, drop in a tab, leave it for about 10 minutes, drain all of that juice out, rinse with lots and lots of water, and again, make sure it's dry. By now, I think we all know that hydration is not something that you should overlook, and it's really important. But the cooling power of water should also not be overlooked, especially when the weather could, well, overcook you. Here's a little hack that I learned when I was in Australia. That's to 3/4 fill your bladder with just water, put it in the freezer overnight, then when it comes to ride day, take it out of the freezer, top up the rest of the bladder with nice cool water, put it back, clip everything in, go for your ride. Now your body temperature and the ambient air temperature will slowly melt that water, providing lots and lots of really cool water, which is very refreshing. Camelbak and a couple of other brands also do insulated hoses and bite valve covers. These do help too, so it stops the water getting really warm in your hose. Lots of these hacks, especially with a hose and bite valve sort of care, work in really cold weather too. So insulate your hose and try and keep that water warm in your reservoir for as long as possible before you head out in freezing weather. Oh, back protectors. Now, quite a lot of backpacks these days allow for back protectors, and they're a great idea, especially if you're riding gnarlier terrain. And if you're riding gnarly terrain when it's really warm, then the back protector has an added advantage. And that's because it creates a barrier, a thermal barrier, between your back and your warm body and the bladder. So it stops you warming up the bladder, helping you keep cooler by keeping the water in your reservoir cooler for longer. One problem I have with other people using reservoirs and Camelbaks is a sloshing sound. It drives me potty, especially on climbs, but you can stop the slosh. It's really easy. No, you don't need 3D printed custom baffles that fit inside. You just need to bleed the reservoir. It's really simple, promise. Just fill the bladder as you normally would, invert it so all of that air moves up to the top near the bottom, effectively where the hose is. Squeeze the bladder really gently whilst pressing the bite valve, and the air should escape the system. It's great, slosh-free riding. Try it. Lots of hydration packs now have dedicated pockets for different tools that you need on the trail. You might have a loop for a pump, you might have smaller pockets for tubes, and you might have pockets, or armoured pockets at least, for knives or multi-tools. And it's really important you use these. Why, you might ask? Well, okay, with a multi-tool it might not be as obvious, but if, for example, something kind of started to poke out, it could get uncomfortable. I mean, at best, maybe you could only pierce your bladder, and I mean your bladder in your backpack, but if things got really bad and you were carrying a knife and it popped open and you crashed in a spectacular way, you could possibly pierce your own bladder, which would be ride wrecking. So if in doubt and you've got a multi-tool that's not smooth, make sure you get a little tool wrap for it. Some tools come with their own cases, and I think they're really good. They keep everything in together and protected, and there's no spiky bits. But if you've got a tool without a case, you could make your own. A good example would be using a hard shell or softer shell glasses case. Whilst we're talking about protection, it's probably a good idea to pack a small first aid kit. No, we don't have to pack a full ambulance worth of kit, just a small amount, just the essentials, because a little can go a long way when things go wrong. Hopefully this has been helpful, and just to reiterate those key points, and that's use mild soapy water to regularly wash your bladder, your hose and your bite valve, and to air dry them all. If you've got any pack hacks that we've missed, let us know in the comments below.